as I was saying, first things first, cutting up my onion and garlic. I'm going to get that in a small saute pan, and we're going to add that to the King Ranch casserole mixture. So there's 100,000 different variations to this recipe, as some of you will probably know. But you usually have a choice between using tortillas, and that'd be corn tortillas, as well as tortilla chips. I do like to stress that if you're going to use tortilla chips, I would steer clear of salted chips, because with everything else that we're going to be adding today, we don't want to make it overly salty. So I'm just getting my garlic peeled up here. We're going to chop that up, start sweating it, and we'll start getting the rest of the King Ranch casserole put together. I'm using also a rotisserie chicken that I'm pulling the meat off of. Just makes it 100 times easier. And you can, cook your own chicken ahead of time, or however you like to do it. But I'm trying to keep things easy, like we did back in the day, or I should say our parents did, and keeping it as simple as possible at the same time feeding a bunch of people and some good flavors. So as I was saying, we're going to start sweating our onions and garlic. I'm just going to put a touch of oil in there, and we'll get that started. As soon as they're softened and a little bit brown, we don't want them charred. But as soon as we get them softened and a little bit brown, then we will go ahead and set that aside to cool down and get the rest of the mixture put together. So there's the mixture, slightly browned, sweat it out. So after sweating the onions and garlic, I got my cheeses. I shredded up myself and mixed. Now I'm using, of course, me being from Wisconsin, 4 different types of cheese, but they're all Mexican cheeses. So we're using queso menonita, I believe that's how it's pronounced. I'm not exactly sure. The queso Oaxaca, as well as vanilla. And I'm just going to mix those all together here, get it all together. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that is one of the other cheeses we've added. All of them are white cheese, a bit on the creamy side, nothing too crumbly. It should all melt really good within the baked dish that we're making. One other thing I wanted to add, when it comes to King Ranch casserole, yet again, all the variations, use whatever kind of cheese you want. I would just steer clear of like a crumbly cheese or a Swiss cheese. Cheddar is often used, any type of yellow cheese like that, Gouda, but these are the ones I'm using today. Also want to show you all the starter that we're using for this King Ranch casserole. Is a cream-based type sauce. In my opinion, it is a bit too thick, so I'm going to get it hot and thicken it up a little bit before we start putting everything together. That way it's not super watery when we bake the dish. Now, a lot of that moisture will cook out and it'll thicken as it bakes, but this, in my opinion, just tends to be a bit too loose, watery. But before it starts to thicken, I'm going to add my onion and garlic to the mix. That's going to help disperse the flavors a little bit more as well. So just put that right in the pan there. Try to get all those drippings and things out of there as well. And that's all going to add flavor. As soon as this comes up to a small boil or like a simmer, I'm going to add some cornstarch, and I'm not adding a lot. I'm just adding about a tablespoon in some cold water to just thicken it just a touch. And always save the liquid from the rotisserie chicken because it is delicious. I'm going to add that to this mixture as well. Something else I want to point out about the rotisserie chicken that I'm using. First of all, whenever you're using bone-in chicken to pull the meat off for a dish, you want to be ultra careful that you're getting all those little chewy knuckles, any type of pin bones or anything like that that might be in that chicken. You don't want it in your baked dish. Someone will come across it, can choke on it, but more importantly, I'm trying to preserve as much meat off this as I can and zero bone. One thing I wanted to point out though that most people don't know about, on the back of this chicken, when you pull the thigh off, we're just going to yank that out right there. There's a part right here, right about the hip where that meets. It's called the oyster of the chicken. Now it's going to be a little morsel like that, but this is going to pack super flavor. Sometimes I just be sneaky and eat it before we actually get it in our dish. But if you're unaware of that, again, it sits right here on these bones. Pull it off and try it out. It is awesome and delicious. did add the cornstarch already, so it's much thicker than it was, but it's still not too thick. So that's all I wanted to show you on that. So next step, as that mixture is cooling down, I got all my meat off the bone on the rotisserie chicken. Just give that a look there. And I am going to save the skin. Now, for this dish though, you don't want it too shredded up. You want some nice chunks of chicken in there. So I'm going to set the breast aside for a minute, because that's going to be the one that's going to be probably the hardest to really decide on how big you want the pieces. But like in the thigh meat, just break them up a little bit. You kind of want some nice chunks there. That way when you put it in your dish, and tear that skin up just a bit so it doesn't get too big. But yeah, just tear the skin up, give it a small little shred there. While you're doing this, be cautious again of, like I was saying, the bones. If you come across any other bones or knuckles or anything like that, now is the time to be able to pull that stuff out. So I am using the skin because of course it has plenty of flavor. But again, we just want to break these up into big chunks. We don't want it too shredded. We want to be able to have a nice bite on that chicken. And once this is all busted up and the mixture's cooled down, we're going to get that all mixed together, and then we'll show you how we start layering. Alright, now that we're at the breast, again, the breast is going to be really dry. We all know that, but on rotisserie chicken it helps a little bit because it does have some of that moisture retained. So there again, you want to be careful as to how big of the chunks you're going to have. You don't want a nice dry piece of chicken breast meat. But we're going to break this up into nice chunks as well. I'm going to take the whole breast here. I'll show you how we do that. Just breaking off piece by piece. You see the size of the chunk we want to leave like that. And again, tearing up the skin as well as you go along. Now these ones you want a little smaller because again, you don't want that dry chicken breast mouthfeel. So again, once we get this all done, we'll get the mixture put together and then we'll start layering the dish. So right here, even though it's still a little hot, we're going to start pouring in our sauce. Just go ahead and dump that all in there. Again, it is a bit warm, so we're going to give it just a bit to cool down. And then we just want to toss all that chicken with the sauce. Now here as well, I am also going to do a little something from the norm. I'm going to add some I did taste the sauce mixture earlier. It is not very salty. So again, you just want to be cautious of that when you're adding these ingredients. I'm going to use about half a packet. It's going to add some nice flavor to it, a little more salt, and I'm also going to add a touch of the Goya seasoned salt to it. Again, once it's all in there, just start giving it a mix. And before we start layering, we're going to want this to cool down significantly. You always want to taste as you go, and I'm coming to find that this mixture needs a little bit more of certain seasonings. It's always perfect to be able to do that. That makes it your own dish. But what we're doing right now is I'm adding a little bit of chili powder. I'm going to add a little bit of cumin. I ended up using the rest of that packet of the chicken seasoning, taco seasoning, and again, just a touch more of the Goya seasoned salt. Alright, so our mixture has cooled, at least to as much as I would like it to. But now we are going to start building this casserole. We're going to layer it about 2, maybe 3 times, depending on how much mixture we have. I'm going to get my cheese out, make sure we got that ready. And I'm going to give that just a little fluff so it's not all clumped together. And we're going to start with a layer of tortilla chips. Again, it's to your discretion whether you use chips or you use tortillas. I like to use the chips. It adds a little bit of a crunch to it. So we want to layer this in a nice, even layer on the bottom of a glass cake pan. I wish I had something with a little higher wall on the side of it. Not as much as like a roasting pan, but pretty close. It'd be nicer because you can get more layers that way. Once you have the first layer down, just go ahead and crush them a little bit so you know exactly where you might need another 1 or 2 chips. And again, with these being unsalted, it's not going to kill us when it comes to the salt content in this dish. Alright, got a nice layer there. So once we got a layer of chips down, I'm going to start adding the mixture. And now it's going to be kind of thick, so you want to kind of push it around so that it all kind of evens out. I might even use my hand a little bit to spread it out evenly. And you don't want it all clumping up to one side versus the other. But once this bakes, it'll all kind of meld together, if that makes sense. So spread that out nice and evenly. And we are going to get to a point where I'm going to get into a bit of what you would call country style. I'm going to put in some black olives. Now, not everyone likes black olives, fully understood. In fact, I'm only going to put it on half of this, just in case someone that will be eating it with us doesn't want the black olives. We'll put that in there like so. Once we got that in there, now is a layer of cheese. So we're going to add that. That's our shredded cheese mixture from earlier. Get this nice and even. And after this, it looks like we're gonna have room for like one more layer. And once we get that layer built, we're gonna put it in our oven to bake. All right, so there's our layered King Ranch casserole all ready to put into the oven. I'm using my toaster oven. We are in Texas. It is hot today. Not crazy hot, but hot enough to where I don't want to crank up the big oven. So I'm going to put this in my toaster oven. That being said, it will take a little longer than in a conventional oven. So probably looking at about an hour or so, but I'm going to keep an eye on it. Once it starts bubbling and stuff around the edges and all that cheese is melted, that's when we know it's going to be finished. But right now, it's ready to rock and roll. I did put a layer of jalapenos on top. Those are just typical pickled jalapeno. Give it a little bit of a crunch and a nice touch. At the end, if you'd like, you can always put on some cilantro, some diced onion. I did forget to get cilantro at the store today, so we're going to skip that one. I might do a little diced onion, and then we're going to use some fresh Mexican crema to drizzle over the top. Just making a short video, finished out of the toaster oven. Give a nice look at that King Ranch casserole. A little more gourmet style. And get a nice close up there, the jalapenos, the cheese, black olives. And we'll show up plating here in just a bit. Alright y'all, now that it's sat for about 5 to 10 minutes, we're going to get it out of that pan onto a plate. Use a sharp spoon, and you can kind of cut it into sections. That seems to be the easiest way to do it, but I use a sharper spoon because otherwise you're not going to get through that first layer of cheese. So get that out of there. Nicely stacked. Put that on our plate there. And that's about a good sized portion. And then, as I was saying earlier, we're going to top it with a little bit of onion and some Mexican crema. And there's a classic King Ranch casserole. Again, meant to feed a whole family. Getting closer there at that shot, I can kind of give you the layers there. Alright, and we'll get a close-up of the layers in the pan as well.